Welcome, sports fans, to another exciting episode of StraussNet Sports Radio. It's postseason baseball time. That starts tomorrow. We will have 4 wild card games for you, 3 days in a row, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The new round, it looks just like it did in 2020 in terms of the format. 3 games in one park, the higher seed hosting. The only difference from 2020 is that instead of everyone playing in the wild card round, the top 2 division winners in each league get a bye straight to the division series. So that means the 3rd division winner does not get that privilege. They will be in the wild card round. That would be the Cardinals and the Indians. Let's look at the standings real quick and how the year finished. Today we're going to look at the postseason, kind of how they match up. I'll make my final World Series prediction, and we'll go back over what we did in the beginning of the season and the halfway point. And we'll look at the Cardinals a little bit specifically, because that's who I like to focus on here on StraussNet Sports Radio. First, over in the American League, the Houston Astros had the best record with 106 wins. They are the 1 seed. The Yankees with the 2 seed at 99 wins. Aaron Judge, number 99, got 62 home runs. He passed Roger Maris for the American League single-season home run record. Barry Bonds still holds that record. I respect you if you disagree with that, but in terms of the record books, that's how it is. Cleveland Indians, the Guardians, they have 92. Then we get to the wild cards. Toronto got the first one at 92 wins as well. The Seattle Mariners finally broke their playoff drought with 90 wins. And the Tampa Bay Rays, who kind of were the top wild card team for a long time, are at 86. Over in the National League, the Atlanta Braves, the Los Angeles Dodgers, and the St. Louis Cardinals, East, West, and Central. The Dodgers, with 111 wins, have the best record in the entire major leagues. The Braves of the East have 101 wins, and the Cardinals at 93. The Mets, who led pretty much wire to wire in the NL East, did not finish with they tied the Braves, and the Braves had the tiebreaker. 101 wins. I kind of feel for the Mets because they looked really impressive. I've had them as a World Series contender all year, and they fell. That doesn't mean that they will fall in the playoffs, but they did not succeed in winning that division like many thought they would, including myself. And that's going to affect how I feel about them down into the playoffs. They did not perform necessarily quite as well down the stretch as you'd like. They got swept by the Braves. It was a 1-game difference. They win that one more game against the Braves. They have 102 wins. The Braves only have the 100. Padres are next with 89, and the Phillies with 87. So what does that mean for the playoffs? Well, that means tomorrow we are going to see, in this order tomorrow specifically, at 11 a.m. Central Time, the Tampa Bay Rays will take on the Cleveland Guardians in Cleveland, Ohio. That's on ESPN. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, 1:07, the Phillies will be hosted by the St. Louis Cardinals at Busch Stadium. Then the Seattle Mariners at 3:07 will be at the Toronto Blue Jays. And then finally, the San Diego Padres are in New York against the Mets at 7:07 p.m. All those are ESPN except for the Cardinal game is on ABC. I will be very excited to see how that goes. I will be on with Mr. Rizzo on ESPN Peoria talking about that after the game. For anybody who's listening tonight, this will be posted tonight. So that means, in terms of the bracket, we'll start again in the National League. The Mets and the Padres, the 4-5, will face off eventually with the Dodgers, the best team in baseball. The way they have it set up is that the number 1 seed cannot play a division winner. I've seen different tournaments do it different ways, where maybe the 1 seed is set up so they can play the lowest seed, but that also might run them into a higher seed. In this particular case, they can't play the 6, but they can't play the 3 either. So the Dodgers will get the Mets or the Padres. The Atlanta Braves, the 2 seed, will get the winner of St. Louis and Philadelphia, 3-6. Over in the American League, Houston, the number 1 seed, will get the winner of Toronto-Seattle, the 4-5, and the Yankees, the number 2 seed, will get the winner of Cleveland-Tampa, 3-6. So let's look at some of these head-to-head records here. I have it pulled up on my computer, if I could get to it. There we go. Let's start with our series, the Cardinals. This is the one that I will be keeping an eye on. I wanted the Phillies. I didn't really want the Brewers. I didn't want to deal with the Brewers pitching. Having said that, the Phillies do have really good pitching. We already know the matchups for the first two games. It's going to be Zach Wheeler versus Jose Quintana, and Aaron Nola versus Miles Michaelis. Game 3 is TBD on both sides. The Cardinals they've had trouble with Adam Wainwright lately. Wainwright has had trouble getting right. He got a ball off the knee at some point. He says he is not injured, but he messed up his mechanics, and he hasn't been able to get right. His last start was not very good. So the Cardinals have gone with Jose Quintana, who's the hot hand. He's been very, very good lately. And Miles Michaelis, who has been a guy who's maybe been the most reliable all year. So it'll be interesting to see how they use Wainwright. Jack Flaherty is on the roster. Jordan Montgomery is also an option, a guy who many thought might be your game 1 or 2 starter. Earlier in the year, it looked like maybe Montgomery was your number 2 starter and Quintana was lower, but Quintana is pitching the best. And there's different ways to look at it, too. Nola is considered maybe the Phillies' best pitcher, although Wheeler is very, very good. In a 3-game series, you could say, let's pitch the number 2 guy in game 1, and then we have our best pitcher for an elimination game, because it's an elimination game for someone in game 2. And then you go to game 3. Who knows? Maybe they felt like the lefty matchup. Maybe we see Montgomery in a potential game 3 on Sunday. The other 2 games of the Cardinal series will be at 7:37 Central Time, Saturday and Sunday. Tentatively, Sunday could get moved up to 6:37 if they are one of the only series, but they plan to have them in prime time. So let's look at this season series. This was a split series. This was a pretty even series. 1, 2, 3, 4 for the Phillies and 3 for St. Louis. The first series was in Philadelphia, best of 3. Phillies took 2 of 3. The game the Cardinals won, it was 7-6. If you remember, that's the game where they hit 4 home runs in a row. So that was a pretty memorable game. Meanwhile, in St. Louis, they split a 4-game series. Philly winning the first 2, 2-0 and 1-0, and then the Cardinals winning 4-3 and 6-1. This is also, it's July 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and then 8, 9, 10, and 11. It's wrapped around July 4th, where they went to Atlanta to play the Braves. Remember, Cardinals did not have the likes of Quintana and Montgomery back then. Andre Palante was not in their bullpen. They didn't have Jordan Hicks back. Now they've figured out Zach Thompson as a possible lefty option. The teams are just a little bit different. So it was a very even series. I expect this to potentially go to Game 3. I would hope that the Cardinals can sweep, but honestly, I think this is going 3 games. I do think the Cardinals are going to win, and as I do this, I am writing this down so we can predict the next round. I think the Cardinals can win this round. It's going to be a good series. I don't like this first round because I'm a traditionalist, and I think that we've added too much, but this is a fun matchup, and it's going to be very exciting, I think, for all of these games. High intensity from the beginning. So I'm going to call Cardinals in 3, and I'll even write that. Cardinals in 3. Let's look at the other National League series. That is Mets-Padres. And for that series, San Diego, 6-game series. 4 went to San Diego. The first series in San Diego, the second in New York. June 6, 7, 8, and July 22, 23, 24. Mets only won 2. Now, I think with Jacob deGrom back, I think the Mets have an advantage here. I'm going to say Mets in 2. I could see Mets in 3, but I'm going to say Mets in 2. Good pitching on both sides. The Juan Soto trade changes a lot. The Padres beat the Mets without Juan Soto, but I just think I've been on the Mets all year. I think they're going to be fired up by losing that last series against the Braves to put them in a bad spot. I think they'll be ready to go. I really like this team. I like how they're built. They're not built just to hit home runs, so I'm really excited to see what the Mets can be. They are still a big pick for me. I mean, the National League's going to be really tough to judge. That next series would be Atlanta and St. Louis, and then Dodgers and Mets. I have the Cardinals getting the NLCS. I really think they can. The Cardinals played the Braves pretty well late in the year. I'm probably going to say St. Louis in 6 if, in terms of the LCS, but the Mets-Dodgers is going to be a lot more interesting. I think I still like the Mets in terms of being able to potentially get to the World Series, but I just don't feel like they're as hot as they were. I feel like everything the Dodgers have been doing lately has been right. I really do. I think the Dodgers are just a little bit better than the Mets are. Let's look at how they kind of did down the stretch, the two teams, as I open that up. So we're looking at the Dodgers. Go to schedule. And they actually lost 3 of their last 5, but, what does that mean this late in the season? Go back into late September, and they were on quite a roll. They did pretty well against San Diego. They did well against the Cardinals. And some other teams are mixed in there. They did play the Mets late in the year, late August, early September. And they actually lost 2 of 3 to the Mets. So that's an interesting thing there. It shows the Mets can play with them. In terms of the Mets, they got swept by the Braves. That's a bad look to end the year. But they did win 3 of 4 against the Nationals. 3 of 3, I guess. They pushed one of those games. Meanwhile, they lost the Atlanta series. Let's go back to September. And they did have a nice winning streak against Pittsburgh and Milwaukee. Did pretty well against Oakland. Split with Miami. I don't feel like the Mets are firing on all cylinders like they were early in the year. They really impressed me, but right now, so I'm going to go Dodgers. I'm going to go Dodgers in 5. And then on to the World Series. I think I really like the Cardinals. I would love to see them win. I don't think they're quite as good as the Dodgers, and the Wainwright thing is not going to help them. I'm going to go Dodgers in 5, unfortunately. So that's a change from before. So let's open our sheet up. I had Dodgers winning the World Series I have a late September. I have the paper that I wrote this on at the beginning of the year. If we remember, I had Dodgers in the NLCS, winning the NLCS. Yep, I had the Dodgers win the NLCS at the beginning of the year, and Toronto winning the whole thing. Later in the year, July 4th, I had the Mets going to the World Series, but losing to the Yankees. And then on 9/8, I had the Yankees losing to the Dodgers. So I have the Dodgers in the World Series on 2 of the 3 here. Mid-season, the Mets looked like a favorite, but the Dodgers have held true. Not every year does the super favorite, in hockey with the President's Trophy winner, who's the best record in all of hockey, most points. There's kind of some pressure. Teams don't usually end up getting it done, but sometimes you see like a 2018 Red Sox just have all the pieces. I think the Dodgers have enough pieces, even with the Craig Kimbrell struggles. Someone's going to emerge, and I think they're going to be fine. I think the Dodgers get to the World Series. Now, who are they playing? Let's look at the American League. Over in the American League, we're going to look at the Toronto-Seattle series first. Now, Toronto's someone who I was very high on. Remember, I said Jays were going to be in the World Series and lose to the Dodgers initially. Seattle, meanwhile, this upstart group, has broken their playoff drought. Well, this series was very Seattle-dominated. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of 7 were won by Seattle. May 16th, 17th, 18th were in Toronto. July 7, 8, 9, and 10 were at Seattle. Seattle swept that series, and then they won 1 of the 3 in Toronto. Now, also remember, earlier in the year, you couldn't play in Toronto if you weren't vaccinated. So, the Cardinals didn't have Nolan Arenado or Paul Goldschmidt, and Pujols really kind of started his second half there, for example. So Toronto had a little bit of an advantage. These games will be played in Toronto, but the Canadian government has rescinded their vaccine mandate for everyone. You do not have to be vaccinated to go in and out of Canada now. So there will be that won't affect the postseason. I was worried about that all year. What happens if someone like the Dodgers or the Cardinals play in Toronto in the World Series and they lose because they don't have a key player? Well, the answer is that's no longer an issue. Thank goodness. Now, despite Seattle playing as well as they have, and I do like their pitchers. They have Gilbert. They have Gilbert. I'm sorry, I'm a hockey person, so Gilbert is Gilbert to me, of course. They have Castillo. They have Robbie Ray. That's a pretty good rotation. I do like what Toronto has. Manoah's really good. If they could get Barrios figured out, I kind of like Toronto. Let's take a look at them. I have a hard time, just like what I was just looking at. Let's see what Toronto's been doing. I know Seattle's been playing well, but what are the Toronto Blue Jays doing here? Toronto, they were playing Baltimore. Schedule. So at the end of September, Toronto, they did lose 2 or 3 to the Yankees. They split with the Rays. They split with Philly. They won a couple against Baltimore. They split with the Rays. They actually played a 5-game series with the Rays where they took 3 of 5. So they've been playing well. Beat Boston. They're coming off a pretty good run. Seattle, meanwhile, if I can load this up here. Seattle won their last 3 games, 3 of 4 against Detroit, and then they're playing Oakland before that. And they've been a little bit up and down. They struggled in the middle of September, actually. So I'm going to stick with what I was thinking that I hadn't said yet is Toronto. I'm going to say Toronto in 3. I do think Toronto can pull this off. I really think they're a strong contender there. Now I'm just going to say it. I got Houston in 5. I think Houston's going to the World Series, honestly. We're going to have a repeat of the 2017 World Series. I hope the Cardinals prove this wrong. I'd love to see Cardinals-Astros. We haven't had our chance to fight back again after the whole scandal with Houston where there was a claim that they took some of the Cardinals' information. The Cardinals, supposedly one of their guys hacked into the Astros database to find out. Now, none of those individuals work for those teams anymore, but I still would like to see the Cardinals versus the Astros in the World Series. I think that's a legitimate possibility, but we'll get to the Cardinals later. So I have Houston winning. I have Toronto winning in 3 in the wild card, and Houston winning in 5 in the division series. Yes, I'm going to have them go the full 5 games in the division series. I think that's a really good matchup, but they're going to go to the LCS. Meanwhile, the other series, let's look at Cleveland versus Tampa. 1, 2, 3, 4 of 6 went to Cleveland. Cleveland was kind of a surprise team. People didn't think they were going to be much. A lot of people thought, okay, this is the White Sox to lose. The Twins are right behind them after adding Carlos Correa. Cleveland sneakily did a really nice job, and they have some good pitching. Those series were later in the year. They were the July 29, 30, and 31st, and then September 27, 28, and 29. So at Tampa, Cleveland won 2, and at Cleveland, Cleveland won 2. And I know Mike Rizzo, my buddy over at ESPN, he's from Cleveland. I really think Cleveland's going to win this series. He was really worried about playing Seattle, but I think Cleveland's going to win the series. And I'm going to say they're going to do it in 2. I don't think Tampa's going to beat them. I think you get Bieber in Game 1 versus McClanahan, and then someone like Quantrill could pitch Game 2. Savali. They have a lot of good options there. So I'm going to say Cleveland. Tito Francona, great job there. So I'm going to say Cleveland in 2. I think the Yankees beat the Cleveland Indians in 4 to go to the ALCS. New York in 4. So I think the Yankees are going to the ALCS versus Houston again. A few months ago, I would have said the Yankees beat Houston, but now I'm just not on the same page. I don't really feel like the Yankees are quite as good as they were earlier in the year. Their bullpen's a mess. They do have some starting pitching questions. While I do like what they have, and it just feels like Aaron Judge has been carrying them. And is he all messed up from the home run chase? Can he get his swing figured out? His timing? They did get Harrison Bader, so their defense has been solidified. But I'm just not on the Yankees the same. So I'm going to say Houston wins another 7-game series against the Yankees. I don't really know who. I'm not going to say that Aroldis Chapman's going to give up another bomb, but I'm going to say Houston wins in 7. Houston's going to have a long, long playoffs because they're going to have to play 5 in the division series and 7 in the LCS. So that sets up LA versus Houston in the World Series. Now this will be a very interesting World Series. You'll have the likes of Justin Verlander pitching, Clayton Kershaw. I don't think the Astros are. I don't buy them. I don't buy them like I did. I didn't really buy them last year. I don't think they have all the pieces. I think the Dodgers do. I think the Dodgers win this. I'm having a really hard time nailing down how many games it's going to go. You know, maybe the Dodgers win game 1 and 2, and then one of the 3 in Houston, and then 6. So let's say 6. I'm going to say 6. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to say they win the first 2. That was the problem last time, although there was the cheating involved. But the Dodgers only won 1 of the 2 at home, and then had split in Houston, and then the games in Los Angeles in 2017. I'm going to say the Dodgers win in 6. So Dodgers in 6 over the Houston Astros. They will win the World Series. They're going to prove that 2020 was not a fluke despite the shortened season. They're going to prove that their failures of 2017 and 18 were just part of this mini dynasty because they didn't win. They've only won the 1. So now they'll have 2, although it'll be kind of 2.5 because of the shortened season. And yes, I believe that while they are champions and people should enjoy that they won in 2020, it just probably doesn't feel the same. And they get to actually celebrate for real this time. They don't have to worry about celebrating, masked up or without their families or with limited fans and limited contact. They can do it for real this time. So I have the Dodgers. So there's your World Series. Dodgers over Houston. Cardinals and Yankees will make it to the League Championship Series, but alas, they will not quite be good enough. And it looks like a long postseason. I have the Mets sweeping the wild card series. It's just 2 wins, but the Cardinals going 3. I have the Dodgers and Cardinals going deep. I actually misspoke earlier. I have the Cardinals going 6 games in a 5-game division series. So I'm actually going to say that the Cardinals go 5 in the division series with Atlanta. So just like 2019, it'll go 5 games. I think the Dodgers and Mets goes 5 games. That's 3 of those series going 5 games. The 4th one going 4 in the Yankees. So usually you're good for about 1 sweep in the division series. That's not going to happen. We got, like I said, we got Mets in 2, Cardinals in 3, Dodgers and Cardinals in 5. Dodgers in 5 in the LCS of 7. And then the Yankees hosting Cleveland as a sweep, a 2-game sweep. Toronto playing all 3. Houston winning in 5, Yankees in 4, and then Dodgers in 6. That's most of the postseason games. You're only leaving off, 1 here, 2, 3, 4 whole postseason games to go a max. I don't think we've ever seen a max postseason where everything goes 5 and 7. Just the Mets series, the Cleveland series, the Yankees series, and the World Series going, So, but I digress. There's your postseason prediction. After all that, I have Dodgers over Houston. So comparing that to the beginning of the year, I had Jays over Dodgers. Halfway through the season, I had Yankees over Mets. So the Dodgers were good in the preseason predictions. The Yankees and Mets I do not have replicated in the preseason, although I replicated from the preseason prediction of the July 4th. I do have both those teams getting the League Championship Series. And then in my September post-trade deadline, I believe that was a football preview episode, I had Dodgers over Yankees. So the Dodgers I have pretty consistently being involved. The Mets and Yankees had impressed me halfway through the year, but the halfway champions did not impress me enough in the second half to put them in the World Series. Now, oddly enough, I did not have Houston go into the World Series at any given point. I didn't have the Cardinals go into the World Series at any given point. I didn't have Houston. I didn't have the Cardinals. I had LA, and I had the Yankees. But we'll see. It's a long postseason. It all starts tomorrow. It's going to be crazy. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Cardinals a little bit. Maybe we'll look at their roster breakdown and what we might see out of them. We'll be right back on StraussNet Sports Radio. We're back on StraussNet Sports Radio. Thanks again for listening. It is the MLB Postseason Preview Show. I went through the brackets. It was kind of fast-paced. I've been thinking about this, if you can't tell. We had the Dodgers beating the Astros in a 6-game World Series. The Cardinals playing a 3-game series in the wild card, a 5-game series in the division series, and losing out in 5 games to the Dodgers. I just don't think the Cardinals are on the Dodgers level. And let's look at that Cardinal team. So they're going to play tomorrow. I said earlier, Quintana's going to pitch Game 1, Michaelis in Game 2, and the name you're not hearing is Adam Wainwright. And this is part of the problem. This is why I can't pick them to go to the World Series at the moment. I can totally see it happening. I hope it happens. But let's look at some of the candidates. The MLB.com does not have their roster submitted. They have talked about some people who are going to be on it. So let's just kind of walk through it. They said Jack Flaherty will be on it. He's pitched pretty well. They did pitch him out of the bullpen the last week to see if he can be a weapon out of the bullpen. There's scuttle here and there that he could be an option for Game 3 because if he's right, he's really, really good. I feel like he's still a gamble, but we'll see. He hasn't pitched horrible when he's come back. Gallegos will be in the bullpen. Helsley will be in the bullpen. He jammed his finger, but he will be fine. I imagine Jordan Hicks will be. Jordan Hicks is a guy who's supposed to be a big stud reliever, and he hasn't quite been that. We'll see if he can be. He just came back from an injury, and he was kind of starting to get going before that. They said supposedly Steven Matz, who was out for a lot of the year, he's been moved to the bullpen for the time being. Probably back in the rotation next year, but Matz will probably be in the bullpen. Like I said, Michaelis, I think Jordan Montgomery might be the safest option for Game 3, if you want to talk about the safest option. I really like what he's done with the Cardinals. I'm very excited to have this guy. Andre Palante will be in the pen. Quintana. Stratton will likely be with them. Zach Thompson's become a lefty weapon for them, even though he's a starting pitcher. But the other guy that we're not really talking about here, is not listed here, is Genesis Cabrera, who was their lefty specialist, lefty setup guy early in the year and late last year, and going back to 2020 and 2019. He faced hitters the other day. He had a little bit of a practice they had JoJo Romero on the roster as well. So there's some question about will Genesis Cabrera sneak onto this roster. You know, I've been saying for a while now that I feel like they're better with Genesis Cabrera in the pen just because of his stuff, but he just hasn't been that good this year. I think the Cardinals feel the same way. If they could roll the dice and get him to pitch well, but he hasn't been in the majors for a while. It's been about a month or so. So he'll be an interesting factor. Jake Woodford, who I don't know that Woody's going to be on the roster. Woodford's been a nice piece, but they haven't used him that much this year in big spots. So if there's somebody who loses a spot, I would bet it might be a Jake Woodford type, a right-hander. And Wainwright. This is the big question. I said it earlier. Adam Wainwright got hit by a liner in the knee at some point. He did not, it wasn't a major injury, but he was favoring it some. He said he messed his mechanics up in the process. He is not still hurt, he says. It is a mechanical issue that he's been working through, and he has not found the right combination or setup. If Adam Wainwright were right, he'd be pitching tomorrow. So this is the problem. You don't have Adam Wainwright pitching Game 1 or 2. Maybe he pitches Game 3. Maybe it's somebody like Montgomery or Flaherty. Maybe Wainwright pitches out of the bullpen. I don't see the Cardinals getting to a World Series without Adam Wainwright being a significant contributor. He is supposed to be their number one pitcher right now. And I cannot get past that. Adam Wainwright is a humongous part of this team. We've seen how big he was. Last year he pitched against Scherzer and pitched a gem. A few years ago, 2019, he kind of had a resurgence late in the year. He pitched a big-time Game 3 of the division series, even though they lost that game. He pitched a big-time Game 2 of the NLCS against the Nationals, even though they lost. Adam Wainwright's the horse. He has a 3.71 ERA this year, so it's not as good as it was. He's 11-12, but they're better with Adam Wainwright than not having him. So it'll be very interesting to see how that happens, what they do with him. I'm going to guess they might try him in a game 3. It could also be a Montgomery situation based on how the lefties of the Nationals, the Phillies, are doing against somebody like Quintana versus what happens against Michaelis. So I don't think Jack Flaherty is going to be a starter. I think he's going to be a piggyback type. As for the rest of the roster, you're going to see Yadier Molina. He'll play over Kisner, but they'll have Kisner. But the lineup will be interesting. They've got Arenado, DeYoung, Donovan, Edman, Goldschmidt. I don't think Burleson will be on the roster. Carlson, I don't know that we're going to see DeLuzio. Dickerson, Nootbaar, Yepes, and Pujols will all be there. Tyler O'Neill will not. He had dealt with a hamstring injury late in the season. He's been on the IL. He has been announced that he will not join them for the wild card. I'm going to guess not the division series. I don't think we see O'Neill till the NLCS. And then there's a matter of would he start even if he does make the team? If they have somebody hot, then they're going to play him. Now, late in the year, they've been running out their, Nootbaar plays right, generally. Carlson has been playing center, and Dickerson's played a lot of left. They have snuck Yepes in there. I think you're more likely to see Yepes against the left-handers as a right-handed hitter. But you could see Yepes in there against these two righties, just if they think he's hitting better than Corey Dickerson lately. Dickerson's kind of been up and down all year. He had a really rough early part of the year, but said he wasn't healthy, and he came back in the middle and late part of the year and actually played really, really well. But then lately he's been slumping. So I think if I were riding the lineup, I would have Corey Dickerson batting in there in left field, and then obviously Pujols is your DH. Albert Pujols was supposed to platoon, and he has become the 700 home run dude, the king. Not all time, obviously, but this miracle run, this storybook finish has ended way different. I'm going to eat my crow here and say I was wrong. I thought Pujols would just be a gimmick. I thought it was going to be a problem, and now it looks like Albert Pujols is everything that we hoped he would be when he came back. Hopefully we get one more storybook ending with him in the postseason, but I didn't think it would go that well. I thought he'd hit some home runs against lefties, and he wouldn't be any good against righties, and they'd overplay him, but the reality has been, as the season's gone on, he's gotten better in the second half. Like I said, from that Toronto series, right around the All-Star break, he really took off. I bought a new Pujols jersey. I'm having trouble deciding what jersey I will wear to the postseason Saturday. I'm going to Game 2. I have not gotten to wear my new Pujols jersey to a game yet because the couple times I wanted to, Adam Wainwright was pitching, and I generally will wear the Wainwright jersey. Usually I wear my authentic Saturday David Freese jersey with the Stan Musial patch that I got in 2014. That's kind of my opening day. That's my gamer, so to speak. I'm very tempted to wear the Albert Pujols jersey, but I'm going on Saturday, so that's also there. We'll see. Hopefully, I hopefully don't jinx it. I'm not that superstitious, but I also don't like to change up my routine. It's weird. I'm like half superstitious. If I were writing a Cardinal lineup for the game tomorrow, I would probably have to think about going Edman or Donovan. I know they've been putting Edman lower in the lineup, but I would actually like to see them lead Edman off I'll say stability, for consistency. This is what they've been doing for a lot of the year. Let's go to what worked for most of the year. I know Edman hasn't been the same in the second half, but I'm going to go Edman, Donovan, Goldschmidt, Arenado, Pujols, Carlson, Dickerson, Yachty. Who am I forgetting? Oh, and then Lars Nootbaar. I'm going to bat Lars Nootbaar ninth. They were hitting Lars Nootbaar 1 for a while. It was kind of working. He slowed down, so I'm going to put him ninth, get that wraparound going. That's the alternate way to do it. You put Edman, if you want to put somebody like Edman later in the lineup, or you could put Carlson second, but I think that's the Cardinal lineup I would run out there. And Yepes is interchangeable. I'm going to give Carlson a shot higher in the lineup because I think if he's healthy, he has been a pretty good hitter. So, again, my lineup's going to be Edman at shortstop, Donovan at second base, Goldschmidt at first, Arenado at third, Pujols, the designated hitter, Carlson in center, Dickerson in left, Yadier Molina catching, and Lars Nootbaar, the right fielder. I think just go to kind of what's worked. Don't mess around. Don't analytics it. Just this has kind of been your lineup here and there. Just do that. Now, Nolan Gorman, they've also been looking at him. I don't know if I trust Nolan Gorman in this situation, not having been with the team for a while, not getting the regular Major League at-bats. You could play Nolan Gorman at second and move Brendan Donovan to left field, therefore canceling out the Corey Dickerson question. Gorman has a lot of pop in his bat. He did play a good second base. I'd be curious to see if they put him on the roster over somebody like a Paul DeJong. Donovan can play short. Edman can play short. You don't need Paul DeJong. DeJong hasn't done that much for you this year. I'm very tempted to put a Nolan Gorman on my roster as a bench bat or somebody you can put at second base. So I think they have a chance. I think they can win. I think they can win in 2. I think they can win in 3. I hope that they win in 2. I really do. The Phillies are a better team than a lot of people are going to give them credit for, just being the last team in. Tampa, I think, is going to get credit. I feel like those American League teams are a little bit closer than the National League ones are, feel like, because you have, Tampa, who was in the World Series a few years ago, and the Jays, who everyone thinks are going to get to the World Series, and then the Seattle thing where, everyone's excited about them. Let's take a look at the Philadelphia Phillies roster. Just kind of go through. I'm not going to predict lineups or anything like that, but just see some names that stand out to me. I'm not really sure who they would have as their third starter. Noah Syndergaard is, I think, a candidate. They've got Ranger Suarez. I know they have a couple different options. I'd pitch Syndergaard in Game 3. They went and got David Robertson, the veteran from the Cubs. He will be their closer. Obviously, everyone knows about Real Muto. Alec Boehm, oddly enough, earlier in the year said, I hate this place. He got caught on cam saying, I hate this place, because he's had a rough go, but now he is enjoying being a member of the Phillies. Rhys Hoskins, Gene Segura, Bryson Stott, the young player. People forget they have Nick Castellanos. They got him as a free agent, somebody who the Cardinals have had trouble with. Kyle Schwarber, he's the home run king in the National League this year. They traded for Brandon Marsh of the Angels, I remember. I was really stunned that the Angels gave up on him. They flipped him for Mickey Moniak. I thought he was a good player. I don't know what the Angels are doing, but I think the Phillies got a good one there. And obviously Bryce Harper, who just hasn't quite been right all year, but he's a big bat. So they're very similar. They don't have the full rotation that you would think of. Like the Cardinals have a good rotation. The Phillies have some under-the-radar pitchers. There's some questions in the bullpen. They have a stud catcher, even though Yachty is older and Real Muto's in the prime of his career still. There's some questions about what their lineup will look like, but they are a good hitting team. So I'm still going to predict the Cardinals win this one. I think they do well at home. I think they're more relaxed at home. I think they get it done. They've been playing pretty well. There's a little bit of stress in Cardinal Nation, anxiety that they peaked in August too early because they slumped in September, but they kind of rebounded late. So I think the little bit of a reset they're getting over the last couple of days, they clinched in Milwaukee, and they were able to play all 6 games against the Pirates with no stress. It doesn't mean a thing. They weren't moving up. They weren't moving down. So some people say rest is bad, and to a degree they were resting and playing some spring training games, but I think this will be good because there's been so much pressure on the Pujols home run situation and clinching the division and holding off the Brewers, and they're slumping, and they had to play the Dodgers and the Padres. Well, I think letting off the gas here was actually good for them because now they can ramp it back up. They are pretty healthy. I think the Adam Wainwright situation, while it's a huge factor, is probably their biggest factor. But I think Cardinals can go far. I got asked on ESPN the other day, do I think the Cardinals can go to the World Series? I think they can. I don't predict them doing so. I hope I get proved wrong. I hope I'm proven wrong. I remember 2011. I know 2013 they were one of the best teams, but they seem to do their best work when they're counted out. So maybe some people will count them out. When we come back, we're going to look at one more thing, and that is hockey season is starting tomorrow. I'll be right back with that on StraussNet Sports Radio. Welcome back to StraussNet Sports Radio. This has mainly been the postseason, the MLB postseason preview show, and I'm not really doing an NHL preview show, it feels like. Hockey season's starting here pretty much tomorrow, so we're going to preview the Blues here. I haven't looked at NHL as much as I would like to. I'm just going to be honest there. I would really like to. I did an NFL preview show. I've done an MLB preview show. I guess I could still do one in the coming days, but it's always weird. I told my dad it's weird because when hockey is ending and baseball is starting, it feels natural. It's like, okay, baseball's back. But the other way around, and we get the hockey playoffs at the beginning of baseball season. I enjoy that. But the other way around, my two co-hosts are fighting, and it's adorable. Some of you know my co-host Kit Kat, my furry friend. Well, we have a new one, Luna. She's a kitten, and Kit Kat is allowing her to live. But they're kind of arguing right now. No, that's not Tim and my dad, Mark Strauss, or Rizzo or anything like that. It's just the two cats who are helping. So if you hear jingling, that's two cats fighting. They're fine. Don't worry. Where was I? The Blues. Oh, yes. So I said in April and whatnot, it feels natural when hockey bleeds into baseball. But when baseball bleeds into hockey, it's like, what's going on here? It shouldn't be hockey season. So it kind of gets away from me. I just had a fantasy hockey draft, and the goalies went really early, by the way, for anyone drafting. It just doesn't feel like it should be hockey season. It snuck up on me. So like I said, I want to do a preview show. Maybe I shall in the coming days. And it might even happen in the beginning part of the season. Maybe I'll get Tim Bradshaw on and we'll do a little bit of a hockey talk. But I'm not going to do a preseason hockey preview. It'll be in the early days, and I will just go off of what I felt early on. But for now, we're going to preview the Blues. So hockey's starting tomorrow, actually, in an overseas series between Nashville and San Jose. There's 2 games, Friday and Saturday. And then we will flash forward to next week. The Blues actually will play their first regular season game on Saturday, October 15th versus the Columbus Blue Jackets. And then they go on the road for 3 games before coming home. So 1, 2, 3, 4 of the first 6 are actually on the road. That next game would be October 26th against Edmonton at home. So they play Columbus, at Seattle, at Edmonton, at Winnipeg, home against Edmonton, at Nashville, Montreal, and Los Angeles at home to round out October. The Blues last year looked like a Stanley Cup contender for a lot of the year. Some injuries brought them down in the playoffs, and they ran into the red-hot Colorado Avalanche in the second round. Not to mention the Avalanche, Nazem Kadri, ran into the Blues goaltender, and that changed things. Because remember, Binnington took the reins back over from Ville Husso, and then Husso had to step back in, and he just wasn't quite as good as Binnington had been in terms of being the hot goalie. So now Husso is in Detroit, as is David Perron. I think that's going to be a bigger loss than anything for the Blues because David Perron does everything. He's an emotional leader. He's a veteran leader. He is somebody who is physical. He scores goals. I think they're going to miss having David Perron in their lineup. But they still have a pretty good lineup if you look at it. We still have Tarasenko, who, while he asked for a trade, it appears he's not demanding it at this point. I think he's open to it. I don't foresee him re-signing next year. He is a free agent after this season. I think he will stay with the Blues unless the Blues fall out of contention. And if they do, that would be disastrous because I think they still are a contender. Jordan Kyrou took a huge step, and I think he will take another step. I drafted him fairly high. I reached for a couple rounds for him. Guys like Klim Kostin, what will he take a step? Pavel Buchnevich is still here. Brandon Saad, a very solid player, even if he's not a superstar, somebody you can put on any line and he will produce. Ivan Barbashev, who's seen as a defensive wizard, a lot like Alex Steen, took a step like Alex Steen last year. He became an offensive weapon, and the question's going to be, just like with Steen at the time, will Barbashev sustain, or will he kind of regress back to being a defensive player? Steen became a superstar for the Blues, and one of their most consistent players. A consistent scorer, and injuries eventually derailed him, and he ended up back being a defensive player. But I think Ivan Barbashev really has a chance, depending on what line he starts the year on, to make an impact. We saw some things out of the young Torpchenko at the end of last year. He is hurt right now. Jake Neighbors, a big draft pick of theirs, has a chance to make the team, and I'm very curious to see how he does. Robert Thomas has supplanted Ryan O'Reilly as the guy considered the number one center on the team. And Braden Shen, who plays all the forward positions, it'll be interesting to see whether he centers like a third line or plays wing. I think a lot of people are forgetting about Braden Shen because he had a down year last year. He said he was hurt for most of the year. He never got right. So I think Braden Shen can actually be a big weapon for them. He can kind of step in and fill some of the Perron shoes this year because they pretty much played the entire year last year not relying on Braden Shen. Well, this year, if they can rely on him to be a scorer and a physical presence, that will help replace some of what David Perron was. Other players to look at, defensemen, they have Justin Falk. Torrey Krug was pretty good last year. He got hurt in the playoffs and never came back, so they tried to do it without him. They did add Nick Leddy last year, and he is back. That was a tough signing for me because the question became, do you have Leddy and have enough defensemen, or do you keep David Perron? And they decided they would rather have Nick Leddy to have the defenseman. There is still talk that they are looking at, I believe, Chychrun from Arizona. I think that's going to be maybe, I don't know, that's a lot to give up to get him. They're going to want draft picks. They want NHL players, and they're going to have to move someone for cap space. So if you're talking about getting rid of a Justin Falk or a Torrey Krug, I feel like you're subtracting to add there. So I'd rather see them hold tight right now. Robert Bortuzzo, Nico Mikkola, and the guy who I didn't mention earlier, Colton Parayko, did not have a great year last year. He could rebound. He's not really been the offensive weapon that he has been in the past. He's kind of been disappointing there, but if you could get him to shoot more, he'd be a big piece. Guys that are not being talked about really, Matt Kessel might get a shot on the team. We had Santini late in the year. Perunovic is going to be out for possibly the whole season. He was a guy who was seen as a big potential young weapon. He took Torrey Krug's offensive spot in the playoffs and did really well. Marco Scandella, who kind of regressed last year with age, he is out for a while with injury. They still have Callie Rosen, who played a lot in the playoffs, more of a defensive player. And then the goaltenders. Jordan Binnington's number one. Thomas Greiss, who's been with the Sharks, most notably probably the Islanders, and he just came from Detroit. Guy who's been a starter and a backup at different times in his career. I think this is a great signing. He can be a really good, solid NHL caliber backup. I know his numbers last year weren't great, but I really do think with a better defensive team, he was in Detroit. I think Thomas Greiss can be really good with the Blues, give Binnington some rest here and there, but also give Binnington the chance to be the number one again. They still have Joel Hofer, their young goalie. They're not ready for him to be the guy. So it'll be interesting to see how the Blues do. No Tyler Bozak. I don't really see Tyler Bozak signing with the Blues like he did last year. I think they really want to give their young guys a chance to evolve. Now, real quick, let's preview the other couple of teams that we've followed here. Someone we haven't talked about much are the Detroit Red Wings on this podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my second favorite team for a long time was the Detroit Red Wings. As a kid, think of yourself, a lot of people are Blackhawk fans around here because when they were in high school and college, the Blackhawks started winning those Stanley Cups. Well, when I was young, the Detroit Red Wings were the team that was like the Blackhawks. They were winning all the time, and they were on TV a lot. So maybe it's, there is a level of exposure. So I watched a lot of Red Wing games, and the Blues weren't great. So I became kind of a Red Wing fan, even though it's a faux pas, because the Red Wings were in the Blues division. They're not now. They're in the East, the Eastern Conference, not just a division. I think the Red Wings are going to be much better this year. They actually were pretty good in the first half last year, and I think they're a team that's getting ready to break into the playoffs. I don't think they're a cup contender, but I think they are a playoff contender. Maybe to go to the playoffs, maybe win a round, one of those, like the Blues were in 12, 13, 14, where they were just getting in, 15, but losing in the first round in a hard-fought battle. Dylan Larkin reminds me a lot of the Steve Yzerman situation. They got him, they cultivated him, they saw his growth, and then as he's getting older and he's the captain now, they need to add. Well, Tyler Bertuzzi is a stud. Last year he was limited here and there because He's unvaccinated, so he couldn't go to Canada. A lot like the Toronto situation in baseball, but there are more NHL teams in Canada, of course. So he was not in the lineup for some of those games. David Perron now on the roster. I think he will be a big addition. They added Oscar Sundquist. Robbie Fabry is going to be out a while. Lucas Raymond, a young player for theirs. They get Vrana back. There's just some good players on this roster. Now, here's the thing. They added Andrew Kopp, who's with the Red Wings. He's got a good number 2 center for them. Now, here's the thing. They're defensemen. They were not good defensively the last few years. Well, now they've got Ben Sherratt, who was with Montreal. I think this is a good move. Moritz Seider is going to be a year older. Maybe he's a little better. I know he had some plus-minus issues. Philip Hronek, he was pretty good. Again, another plus-minus issue at D. Nick Leddy is a subtraction. And they've got Oli Mata. So I think they've added the defensemen. They've added forwards. They've gotten better. They were a team that looked in the first half like they were a potential playoff team last year, but fell off. I think this year they do it. They break into the playoffs, even though I think they might be a first-round loss team. But I think they're making progress. And the other thing is they've added goaltending depth. They added Ville Husso, the Blues' other goaltender, and I think that's a very good move for them because to go along with Nedeljkovic, who did pretty nice last year, between them I think you have someone who's your starting goalie. I think Ville Husso is going to get that first crack at it. I know they were high on Nedeljkovic last year, but I think Ville Husso gets that first crack to see if what he was doing for most of the regular season last year was for real and maybe is a tick better than Ned. So like I said, I think the Red Wings, they get better. They break into the playoffs even if they lose in the first round. And so they've made improvements. I think they should be fun to watch this year. As some of you know, I do have a third team that I follow. I'm embarrassed about it because I don't want to be the guy that likes just everyone. But when I went to New York a few years ago, I enjoyed seeing Madison Square Garden. I loved the city. The Rangers had just won the Stanley Cup in 2014. I went that year. I went in 2017. And they had some Wisconsin Badger players. People know that my dad announced for the Wisconsin Badger hockey team. So I have some interest in the New York Rangers. I think I tend to default to still being a Red Wings fan. I don't like to be wishy-washy. I don't like to claim I have 3 teams or be a fair weather or anything like that. I do like the Red Wings. But it was hard not to be excited about the Rangers at that period of time. And those of us who play fantasy sports also know that if we've had some players on particular teams, we kind of enjoy all sorts of teams. I know my team's the Blues. I hope the Red Wings get better. I've enjoyed watching the Rangers. I do have some Rangers hats. So, we're going to take a look at the Rangers, who I actually put money on last year to win the Stanley Cup during the playoffs. So the Rangers are a team that I think are still good. There are some question marks about them. They added, but I don't know. I have questions about their wingers. They had the kid line last year in the playoffs. Will that get better? That would be Hedl, Lafreniere, and Capo Caco. Obviously, you have Zibanejad, you have Panarin, you have Chris Kreider, but who else is going to step up for this team? Now, they add Vincent Trocheck, and I think that is absolutely huge. That's enormous. It looks like they got Jimmy Vesey back. They actually had him a number of years ago, and he didn't quite work out the way they had hoped, so we'll see how he does. They've added some other players, Krivtsov. I'm not that familiar with him, but they've added him. He left the KHL. I think Trocheck's a really good addition because they really needed a number 2 center. They did lose Ryan Strome, who played pretty well for them. They did lose Andrew Kopp, who played pretty well for them. Their forward group is very similar. It's interesting because I think the Red Wings almost have more firepower, but the Rangers are built much more balanced. They were pretty good last year. Defensemen still got Adam Fox, Lindgren, Jacob Trouba, Keandre Miller. So we'll see how they do. Igor Shesterkin is now backed up Jaro Halak, the former Canadiens, Blues, Bruins goalie, Islanders. We know Jaro Halak from St. Louis. He was supposed to be the guy that took us to Stanley Cup, but it never really worked out. Ended up being part of the Ryan Miller trade in 2014, but has made a nice career for himself and is now kind of a backup goalie as he's gotten older. I think this is a good signing. He's been pretty good for teams as a veteran as opposed to being when he was a young guy and he was seen as a starter. Georgiev heads to Colorado as they, for a third year in a row, will have a different goalie. Had Grubauer a couple years ago. He's on Seattle. Then last year, as they had Darcy Kemper for 1 year, he's now gone. So they move on to Georgiev, and I believe Colorado have Furcuse, who stepped in for them at times last year. It will be interesting to see how Colorado handles it. What do I think for the Rangers? Well, my analysis of the Rangers isn't quite as exciting as the Red Wings. That's why this is getting a little wishy-washy in my analysis. It's easy to say, I think the Blues will still be good, but it'll be interesting to see how the young guys step up. The Red Wings, I think, will be better than they were last year, and I think they can go to the playoffs with the additions they've made. The New York Rangers should be the same kind of team as they were last year. They've made some changes, but I don't see why they can't be a second, third-round caliber team. The goalie, Igor Shesterkin, is the great eraser. He will be the one who determines how good they are. If he does what he did last year, they can go all the way. He was the number 1 overall draft pick in my fantasy hockey league. So there's that. I don't think the Colorado Avalanche win the Stanley Cup again. It's hard for me to say right now in this little mini hockey preview that I said I wasn't going to do. I was talking about how I wasn't going to necessarily make a hockey preview immediately or do that tonight, but I guess we're just getting into it. That's what we call live recording. So if I look at things, I like Carolina, I'm sorry. I like Carolina still. I like Tampa still. Tampa lost to Colorado. I still think Colorado has it due to their scoring, but I just don't see them being quite the same. I don't really know who steps up from the West. I think the Blues are still the best team in that division, are the best team in that division at this point. I think Colorado can score, but I don't think they're quite as good as they were a year ago. Edmonton, is this the year they take the step? Calgary, it feels like, got worse. They moved Matthew Tkachuk to Florida. Do you consider Florida to be a Stanley Cup contender? I don't usually view them that way, but at some point they're going to be pretty darn good. What is Boston? They moved on from their coach who got them to the Stanley Cup final, Game 7 against the Blues. So it's hard to say. If I had to guess, I still like Tampa. I know they're not as deep, and every year it feels like they're less and less deep. But I still like Tampa. They've got Vasilevsky, they got Stamkos, they got Kucherov, they have Point. I still think they're a team to beat. I think Carolina is getting better. I'm going to look at Carolina's roster. They did lose Trocheck. Let's see who their goaltending stands at. They have Frederik Andersen, Antti Ranta. They have Max Pacioretty now. They have Sebastian Aho. They added Paul Stastny, who's not what he used to be, but hey, look, Bobby Orr is on their team. They have Bobby Orr listed on the Carolina Hurricanes roster. It's not the original Bobby Orr. We all know that. So they're a pretty good roster. I like the Rangers a little bit better. I think the Islanders are always kind of dangerous, but they just haven't really taken that step. I think the Bruins are always dangerous. I like Swayman, even though they don't have Rask anymore. I like Swayman. Is Toronto ever going to break out? But yeah, I'd say Tampa, New York, and Carolina in no particular order are my favorite teams from the East. Looking at the West, I still like St. Louis. I think Nashville is better than they get credit for. I know they kind of snuck into the playoffs and got smoked by Colorado, but I like Nashville. I still like Colorado. I think the Blues are one of the most complete teams in that division. I like Minnesota. I do like Minnesota. They were really good last year, and they pushed St. Louis really hard. And the Pacific Division, I don't know how the Kings did it. I like Calgary. I like Edmonton. I do not like Calgary as much as I did. this could be Edmonton's chance to break through. I like them better than a lot of those teams. So, the Blues, they aren't quite what they were a year ago because they don't have David Perron, but I do think that they have a chance to contend for the entire Western Conference. It's going to come down to, is Jordan Binnington back to being what he was when they contended for the Cup? Or will we see more of the 2021 and 21-22 season Jordan Binnington? Good, but not great. If Binnington's really good, this team has the it factor that they could win it all. If I had to pick one team that I liked the most, it's not St. Louis. Honestly, I still like Tampa. I really think Carolina is going to break through here soon. They're getting good, and I don't think they're far off with that roster. So that's hockey season preview that I literally said in this exact episode I wasn't going to do. And there it is. There's a little, I'm not going to predict the Stanley Cup winner. I don't know. There's been a lot of movement. But I do think there's some really fun things to watch for this hockey season. I can't believe it's October. I absolutely can't. We were just doing our preview of baseball. I was in my parents' basement. We had the card table out. I set this up. And me and Dad, we sat and talked about who we thought would win the World Series. And as I said earlier, we thought the Blue Jays were going to win the World Series over the Dodgers. It just happened. And now it's October. The postseason starts tomorrow. We have football going on. For those of you who have been following my football antics, the Patriots are on their third and fourth quarterbacks and look like one of the most boring teams in the NFL. Bill Belichick's like, I don't need no stinking quarterback. I'll just run the ball all game. Which works, but it's just not that exciting. The Indianapolis Colts, who I predicted to be a real contender this year, look hapless. Matt Ryan does not look like he has much left in the tank, but he's using his smarts, and sometimes you need that in a quarterback. So, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are fighting injuries as Tom Brady is wading the waters of TMZ and supposed potential divorce. I won't get into that because we don't really know what's going on behind closed doors. That's his relationship. It's his business. I had Tampa winning the Super Bowl. I still think they can. They can still get their stuff together and get it done. They got to get healthy, get on the same page. Definitely, from the way the season looks, I think Brady's probably going out after this one. I think he still has it, but things just have not looked in sync. But for all I know, a couple weeks from now, he could look great. I know that a lot of people have said that we're used to having a longer preseason, and they've shortened it. And I think, and then maybe teams are going to gel a little later than we're used to. Instead of weeks 2, 3, maybe it's 4, 5, 6. I don't know. But there we are. NFL's going. Hockey starts tomorrow officially, even though there's some more preseason around the corner while the international series is going on. But hockey is starting. Football's going. Baseball postseason starts tomorrow. I hope even if you're a fan of a team that was eliminated, the Red Sox were, and I'm disappointed to lose them, but I hope even if you're a fan of a team that was eliminated, Cubs, White Sox, watch the postseason. You've watched the whole season to see what happens. Watch it. Maybe adopt a team. Maybe don't. I don't really like to say root against someone the whole time, adopt a team to root against, but watch the postseason. It's going to be great. It's going to be great TV, even though I don't like the extra round of playoffs. We'll see how the Cardinals do. That all starts tomorrow. Thank you for listening to StraussNet Sports Radio.